March 1995, scavengers combing a canal in California stumble on a refrigerator. Inside, a woman's body, taped, bound, submerged for months. For 27 years, she was only the lady in the fridge, until a name dropped through DNA. Who was Amanda Lynn Schumann Deza and who silenced her? The sun was already beginning to blister the edges of the irrigation canal when the two men spotted it, an old, rust-flecked refrigerator wedged against the bank, half submerged in algae-streaked water. They didn't think much of it at first. Trash dumped out here in San Joaquin County wasn't anything new. But something about the way it rested, heavy and out of place, made one of them climb down for a closer look. He tugged at the door, and it groaned open with a wet, sucking sound, and then he saw the skin. At first he thought it was a mannequin. The color, waxy and gray. The shape, unnatural, like something posed. But then the smell hit him. Thick, metallic, wrong. A scream sliced through the morning air, and within hours the canal was lined with crime scene tape, deputies, and a growing sense of unease. Inside the fridge was a woman. White, mid to late 20s, bound at the wrists and ankles with electrical cords. A cloth gag shoved between her teeth, her mouth taped shut. The refrigerator had been weighed down with bottles of bleach and antifreeze. Whoever put her there didn't just want her gone, they wanted her erased. The coroner estimated she'd been dead for months. The body showed signs of waterlogging, decomposition, and restraint. There were no ID cards, no personal belongings. Just her. She became known only by what entombed her, the lady in the fridge. Her story hit local news in Stockton, but without a name or witnesses, the case chilled into silence.
If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video.
Police canvassed nearby towns, compared dental records, even ran what little DNA they had against the limited databases of 1995. Nothing. She was invisible. She had no missing persons report attached to her. No one seemed to be looking for her. Some officers believed she might have been a sex worker, someone living transiently or outside systems. Others weren't so sure. Her teeth were clean. Her hair had been dyed not long before her death. Strawberry blonde, shoulder length. Her nails, bitten but painted. She'd once been loved by someone, they said. In the years that followed, detectives would occasionally reopen the file, but each time it ended the same way. Another cold case drawer, another file marked unresolved. For 27 years, her face sat in databases under aliases, sketches, artist reconstructions, until technology finally caught up to her. In 2022, Othram, a forensic genealogy lab in Texas, reached out to law enforcement. Using just a degraded DNA sample from the corpse, they said they could rebuild a genetic fingerprint, not just to identify her, but to trace her family tree. No one expected what came back. Through distant matches, fourth cousins, and GEDmatch entries, they narrowed her identity down to someone who had disappeared, but had never been officially reported missing. A woman named Amanda Lynn Schumann Deza, last seen alive in 1994. Amanda had 3 children, a mother who still held on to her picture, a past that no one in law enforcement had ever connected to the lady in the fridge, and a tragic silence that had stretched across decades. She was 29 when she vanished. Her life wasn't easy. Addiction had followed her for years, and she'd moved between cities, Chico, Stockton, Napa, sometimes with a boyfriend, sometimes alone. But she stayed in touch with her family, until one day she didn't. The most painful part? Amanda's family thought she'd chosen to cut contact. They assumed she was alive, just lost in her struggles. They never imagined she'd been murdered and left to decompose in a canal fridge, a few counties away. When investigators told her mother, she broke down. She had known deep down, she said, that something terrible had happened. But no one would listen. They told me she was just another addict, she whispered, and that she'd come back when she was ready. Now detectives had a name, a face, and a family. But the biggest question still loomed: who put her in that fridge? Amanda had reportedly been dating a man in the Stockton area around the time she disappeared. Some reports say he had a violent history. But without a body back then, there was never a missing persons file, never a formal interview. Now, nearly 3 decades later, tracking him down was like chasing shadows. Detectives reopened the case fully in 2023, treating it as a fresh homicide investigation. They pulled together everything: old tips, past interviews, Amanda's known associates. They revisited the original crime scene and the refrigerator. One investigator, retired now, came back to walk the canal again. He remembered the case like it was yesterday. It was personal, he said. The way she was bound, silenced, hidden, it wasn't random. Someone wanted her story buried. And for 27 years, they almost succeeded. But Amanda's name, once stolen from her, now echoes across a new generation of digital detectives, DNA labs, and the loved ones who never gave up. Her story has been pulled out of the mud and brought back into the light. And justice, long overdue, might finally be closing in. Amanda's daughter was just a toddler when her mother vanished. Now in her 30s, she sat across from detectives with shaking hands, listening to details she'd never imagined. Her mother hadn't abandoned her. She'd been taken, killed, and discarded like garbage. That knowledge didn't soothe her, it hollowed her out. She clutched a worn photograph, Amanda smiling wide, hair freshly dyed, holding her little girl on her hip. "She always came back," the daughter whispered. "Even when things were bad. She always came back." But Amanda didn't come back in 1994. Her mother, Deborah, had tried to file a missing persons report more than once, but law enforcement had been dismissive. "She's an adult," they told her. "She's probably using again. She'll turn up." Deborah remembered the way the deputy sighed when she pressed again, as if Amanda wasn't worth the paper the report would be printed on. So there was no report, no search, and Amanda faded, first from the world, then from the records, until her body, waterlogged and faceless, washed up sealed in a rusted tomb. Investigators now turned to Amanda's last known movements. According to family members, she had been staying with a man in the Stockton area in early 1994. He was older, controlling. She'd called home a few times from borrowed phones. One time, she told her sister she wanted to come home but felt like she couldn't. That was the last they heard from her. No one ever confirmed the man's full name, but the lab's genealogical tracing and police interviews led them to an old address near French Camp Road, just a short drive from where the refrigerator was dumped. The property was long vacated, but in 1995 it had been rented to a man with a record: assault, possession, a history of restraining orders filed by women. His name wasn't in the original file because Amanda had never been listed as missing, but now with her identity restored, every record, every name was on the table. Detectives knocked on doors. Most didn't open. Some neighbors remembered a man living there with a woman who seemed scared. A woman with strawberry blonde hair. She used to walk to the corner store barefoot sometimes, they said, always looking over her shoulder. One neighbor remembered seeing a white refrigerator loaded into the back of a pickup late one night. He thought nothing of it at the time. It was just trash. Now, nearly 30 years later, the memory turned his stomach. The man who once lived there had since moved out of state. He now resided in Oregon under a different last name. Police tracked him down, interviewed him. They didn't announce his name publicly. He wasn't under arrest, but the tone of the investigation had changed. He denied everything, claimed he barely remembered Amanda, said she'd left one day and never came back. But when pressed, he stumbled, got details wrong, then corrected himself too quickly. They asked about the fridge. He said he dumped one around that time, couldn't remember where, said maybe someone else had taken it. Back at the forensic lab, Othram continued combing through what little DNA they could recover from the cords, the gag, the inside of the fridge. Most had degraded beyond usefulness, but they found something. A partial male DNA profile on the tape wrapped around Amanda's mouth. It wasn't enough for a full match, not yet, but it was a lead. Meanwhile, Amanda's case began attracting national attention. The term "lady in the fridge" was now replaced with her real name in headlines. Advocacy groups demanded accountability, not just for the killer, but for the systems that let Amanda vanish without a trace. Why hadn't police listened when her family asked for help? Why had no missing persons report ever been filed? Why was her life weighed so lightly until her death made the news? Amanda's story became a symbol of a wider crisis: how missing women, especially those battling addiction or poverty, often fall through the cracks, how violence against them is treated as background noise. But now she had a voice, and it was growing louder. Her children started a memorial page. Friends from childhood reached out to share stories. A former schoolmate remembered how Amanda used to sing during recess, loud, off-key, but always with her whole chest. She was fierce, one said. She didn't deserve to end up like that. The detective assigned to her case now worked it full-time. He pinned her school photo to his board: blonde bangs, bright smile, wide eyes that hadn't yet learned to be afraid. He stared at that picture daily. Someone loved her, he said. Someone waited for her. Someone killed her. I want to know which. They began re-interviewing people from Amanda's past. An ex-roommate recalled seeing bruises once, but Amanda brushed them off. A former boyfriend, now sober, described her as fragile in private but tough in public, said she was always running from something but never told him what. They tracked down old welfare records, motel registries, even pawn slips from the early 90s. Pieced together a timeline. One entry stood out: a motel in Stockton paid in cash under Amanda's maiden name just 2 weeks before the estimated date of death. They visited the site. It was run down, boarded up, but the clerk who once worked there, now retired, had kept a box of old logbooks for tax reasons. They found the signature. Amanda S. Deza, dated October 21st, 1994. She never checked out. They were getting closer. But the truth, like the canal, was murky, full of silt and secrets. By the time the forensic lab confirmed the DNA on the duct tape belonged to a living male suspect, the mood in the precinct shifted. It wasn't a full profile, too damaged to enter Cody's, but it was enough to privately confirm what detectives had suspected. The man Amanda had been living with in 1994, the one now going by another name in Oregon, had left his trace on the murder scene. It wasn't just speculation anymore. It was tethered to evidence. Detectives submitted a warrant for a DNA sample. When they showed up at his door, the man appeared calm, composed even. He cracked a joke about getting old and always being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He swabbed his cheek without protest, even offered them coffee. But behind his eyes, one detective said later, there was a flicker, like the shadow of someone who's been waiting for this knock for years. While the lab ran its tests, detectives dug deeper into his background. He'd left California in the late 90s, around the time Amanda's story disappeared from casual conversation. His record showed multiple arrests before and after Amanda's death, including an aggravated assault on another woman in 1998. That woman, too, had been gagged during the attack. When police reached out to her, she was hesitant at first. But when she learned this was about Amanda, the girl from Stockton she called her voice changed. She said she'd always believed he had killed someone, that the violence he'd inflicted on her felt like a rehearsal for something worse. He told me once, she said slowly, that some women just need to stay buried. I never forgot that. The DNA match came back days later, partial but confirmatory. It placed the man in contact with Amanda's gag, around her mouth where no one should have been except the killer. It wasn't enough to make an immediate arrest, but it was enough to apply pressure. They brought him back in. This time, his smile didn't reach his eyes. He denied knowing how his DNA could be on the tape. said Amanda used to ask him for help fixing appliances, that maybe he touched something she used. But he stumbled again, first saying he hadn't seen her in months before she disappeared, then admitting she stayed the night at his place once or twice just before she was gone. The walls were closing in, and he could feel it. Detectives now had a compelling narrative. Amanda had attempted to leave. She had stayed briefly in a motel under her maiden name, likely trying to get away, but something or someone stopped her. She never checked out. And days later, she was dead, her body hidden in a refrigerator, discarded like nothing more than evidence to be concealed. A tip came in from someone who had lived in that area of Stockton during the 90s. She remembered a white fridge sitting outside the suspect's garage for days. Said she saw him cleaning something with bleach. It smelled awful, she said. Like death. Back in the cold case room, the detective stood before the crime scene photos again. Amanda's body, knees curled, skin mottled, the cords on her wrists, the taped mouth. It was staged, neat, too controlled for a panic crime. This was someone who had done this before, or at least thought about it long enough to make it neat. Prosecutors weren't yet ready to press charges, but the evidence was growing, and so was public pressure. Advocacy groups began highlighting Amanda's case in media outlets. Justice for Amanda trended briefly on social media. People wanted answers and accountability. Amanda's family, meanwhile, was navigating the resurgence of grief. Her mother sometimes sat in her daughter's old room flipping through school report cards. Her daughter, now a mother herself, spoke to the press. "She didn't get to watch me grow up. She didn't get to see me graduate or have my own kids. Someone took all that from her and from us." A former neighbor of the suspects, who had been silent for years, finally stepped forward. He remembered helping the man load a large appliance into the back of a truck in late 1994. The man had claimed it was broken and he was dumping it in the canal because no one checks there. The neighbor hadn't thought much of it until now. Detectives returned to the canal with sonar equipment. They weren't looking for Amanda anymore. They were looking for patterns, more fridges, more signs. If someone could do this once, maybe they'd done it again. They didn't find another body, but they did find another discarded fridge, sealed with electrical tape. Empty this time, but its presence added to the timeline. The method was practiced, repeated, suggestive of a pattern. And it hinted at something far darker than a single isolated crime. The detective leading the case met with prosecutors again. They now had circumstantial evidence, a partial DNA link, multiple witness statements, a behavioral pattern, and a confirmed timeline. It wasn't slam-dunk material, but it was strong enough for probable cause. They drafted the arrest warrant. When the man was taken into custody, he didn't fight. He barely spoke, just sat in the back of the cruiser staring out the window. But when he passed a mirror at the precinct, he looked at himself and smiled. That smile haunted the officer who saw it. Like he was proud, he said. Like we'd finally caught up, but it was still his game. They booked him for second-degree murder. Not yet for first-degree. Intent would be harder to prove, but the case had momentum now, and Amanda, once erased, was now on the record. The DA's office held a press conference. They said justice had taken too long, that the system failed Amanda in life, but it would not fail her in death. Her mother stood beside the podium. She held up Amanda's school picture, and her voice didn't shake. "She was never trash," she said. "She was my daughter." The courtroom was packed, not with press, though some reporters were there, but with strangers, women who'd survived similar men, mothers who'd lost daughters, former classmates who hadn't heard Amanda's name in decades. They all sat in tight silence as the accused was brought in, shackled and slouched, his eyes scanning the room like a man measuring escape routes. Amanda's mother sat in the front row holding her rosary with knuckles gone white. Her granddaughter, Amanda's child, sat beside her. For the first time, the girl who once cried for a mother she couldn't remember now stared at the man who might have stolen her. He didn't look back. The prosecution opened with images, raw, unfiltered photos of Amanda's body in the refrigerator. Gasps filled the room. Not dramatic ones, more like sharp inhales, like the air had been slapped out of people. The jurors looked away. They built the timeline again: Amanda's last motel stay, her relationship with the defendant, the bleach bottles inside the fridge, the neighbor who helped him move it, the partial DNA on the duct tape. Piece by painful piece, the puzzle reformed itself. The defense called it circumstantial, questioned the validity of degraded DNA, argued Amanda's lifestyle made her vulnerable to other dangers, tried to paint her as unstable, itinerant, unreliable. But the courtroom didn't bite. The jury listened, silent, still. So did the judge. Amanda's daughter took the stand. Her voice was soft, but didn't waver. "She didn't leave because she didn't love us," she said. "She left because she couldn't escape him." When Amanda's ex-boyfriend from years earlier testified about the bruises, about her fear, about how she said, "If I disappear, look for me in the water," the room went cold. The defendant never testified. He sat stone-faced, like someone watching a rerun of a movie he never liked. But his silence didn't save him. The jury deliberated for 2 days. On the third morning, the judge's assistant returned a folded note. Verdict reached. Everyone stood. Guilty, second-degree murder. Amanda's mother wept quietly. Her granddaughter gripped her hand. The accused just nodded, like he'd been expecting this ending all along. He was sentenced to 25 years to life. No chance of parole until year 24. For Amanda's family, it was something. Not enough, but something. After the trial, Amanda's daughter stood at the courthouse steps with reporters circling. She didn't talk about revenge. She talked about memory. She was a person, she said. A mother, a sister, a daughter. And for 27 years, nobody said her name. Now we say it loud. Amanda Lynn Shumandeza. They was buried in a proper grave just outside Stockton. White headstone. Sunflowers etched into the corner. The epitaph was simple. She deserved to come home. But the story didn't end at the grave. Following the trial, 2 more women came forward, women who had dated the convicted killer in the 90s. Both reported violence. One claimed he strangled her once in a rage. Another said he locked her in a shed overnight after an argument. Neither had reported the abuse then. "Who would have believed me?" one of them said. But now they spoke. For Amanda. One of them provided a photograph from 1993, Amanda at a backyard barbecue, sitting on the edge of a lawn chair, arms crossed, smiling shy but tired. The man was in the background, standing close, hand near her shoulder. She didn't smile at him. That photo was submitted to the district attorney's office. Not as new evidence, Amanda's case was closed, but as part of a growing profile. A pattern of silence, of predators hiding behind charm and chaos. True crime podcasts picked up Amanda's case. Documentaries began requesting interviews. But her family limited the media. They didn't want Amanda reduced to sound bites. "She's not content," her mother said. "She's our girl." Still, Amanda's case sparked change. A bill was introduced in the California legislature requiring more proactive follow-up on attempted missing person reports, especially when family members suspect foul play. It was nicknamed Amanda's Law. And at Othram, the DNA lab that cracked her case, her file became a teaching tool, a reminder that the dead still speak, if we learn to listen. Amanda's daughter visited her grave one morning alone. She left a cassette tape player and one of her mother's favorite albums, Fleetwood Mac. She pressed play. The wind moved through the trees as Stevie Nicks sang about Silver Springs, about what could have been. She didn't cry. She just sat, cross-legged, like a child again, and let the music tell its own kind of truth. Back in the canal where Amanda was found, volunteers gathered to clean the banks. They pulled out trash, cleared weeds, planted flowers. They placed a stone at the spot where the fridge once lay. Carved into it, she rose from the cold. Amanda's legacy now echoed in corners no one expected. A face once forgotten became the banner for justice too long denied. She had been silenced once. Not anymore. The seasons changed in Stockton, but the name Amanda Lynn Schumann Deza lingered in the air like a hymn. In schools, she became part of a lesson plan on missing persons awareness. In advocacy circles, her case was cited in grant proposals and community workshops. But for those closest to her, grief didn't follow a calendar. It stayed, reshaping itself, echoing in empty chairs and unasked questions. Amanda's mother, Deborah, took to speaking softly to her photograph in the living room every morning. "You're not just a memory anymore," she'd whisper. "You're history. You're a name people know now." She'd say it like an apology, like it came too late. The man convicted of her murder, now inmate number 8349201, filed an appeal through his attorney, claimed the DNA wasn't definitive, that the trial had been biased by media attention. The appeal was swiftly denied. Still, the very act of trying reopened old wounds. Amanda's daughter had nightmares again, about fridges, about faceless women clawing from waterlogged tombs. It was during one of these sleepless nights she began writing. First letters to her mom, then essays, then a blog. The fridge wasn't her fault. It gained traction. Survivors reached out. Some told their stories for the first time. Others just wrote, "Thank you. I thought no one else understood." In early spring, Stockton held its first vigil for Amanda. It was quiet, candlelit, a slow march along the edge of the canal, the same canal that once hid her. Now it reflected the glow of dozens of flames held high, one for every year she was gone. 27. Amanda's high school friend, now a teacher, brought her students. "I want them to see this," she said, "so they know that every life matters, even the ones people try to erase." Meanwhile, investigators continued looking into other cold cases in the region. The method, binding, gagging, isolation, disposal, wasn't common, but it wasn't unique either. A file surfaced from 1989, a woman found near Tracy, also gagged, also dumped in an appliance. It had been ruled inconclusive. Now it was reopened. The connection wasn't clear, but the possibility chilled detectives. Back at the DNA lab, advances in technology allowed them to rerun the degraded samples. This time, they extracted a second trace, female DNA, possibly belonging to Amanda, but inside the cord knots was another partial male profile. Not the same as the man convicted. A second person? Detectives didn't jump to conclusions. It could have been contamination or a red herring, but the discovery stirred a question they hadn't wanted to ask. Had he acted alone? Amanda's case, once dormant, now forked into new directions. Prosecutors debated whether to re-interview witnesses, to subpoena contacts from his old phone books. But many were gone, moved, deceased. Time had stolen more than just Amanda. One clue emerged, a pawn ticket from 1994, just a week before Amanda's motel stay. It showed her name, but the signature looked forced. Police suspected it wasn't Amanda who had pawned the ring. It was hers. Her daughter confirmed that much. She'd seen it in a photo once, on Amanda's left hand. A small garnet rimmed in fake gold. Sentimental, not valuable. Security footage didn't exist anymore. But the pawn clerk from back then was still alive. Retired but sharp. When shown a photo of Amanda, he squinted. "No," he said. "That ain't the girl who came in." He pointed to a different photo, the man now in prison. It was him. That guy came in alone. If he had her ring before her death, what else had he taken? Amanda's daughter requested to view the evidence box. With detectives by her side, she opened it. Inside was the ring, a hairbrush, the tape, a single shoelace, And then a surprise, a small cassette tape unmarked, found in the fridge buried under her hip. Originally dismissed, left uncatalogued, analog, forgotten. The department borrowed a player from a museum archive. They inserted the tape. Static, then faint music, then silence, then a voice. Amanda. Not clearly, not full sentences, but a hum. A muffled, low hum of Landslide, a song she'd loved, then a breath, then a whispered, "Get out." Silence. Then the tape stopped. Amanda had recorded something, maybe not as a message, maybe just to fill the air, to fight the silence of her own end, but it was something. A ghost finally speaking. Her daughter pressed play again, and again. She cried, but not out of grief. "I finally know what her voice sounded like," she said. The tape would never be released publicly. It was sacred, private, proof of life in a moment of death. In the months that followed, Amanda's law passed the California Senate unanimously. It mandated immediate entry of missing adult reports regardless of lifestyle and created funding for cold case DNA retesting. And in a quiet building in Texas, Othram Labs added Amanda's name to their wall of the found, right next to others who had for decades gone nameless. Now, they had identities, stories, truths unearthed by those who refused to let silence win. Amanda's granddaughter, now 8, painted a portrait of her grandmother in art class. Blonde hair, green eyes, sunflowers in her hands. "She's an angel," she said. Yes, she is. But more than that, she was a fighter. A mother. A girl who loved Fleetwood Mac. A name that finally had a home. Amanda Lynn Schumandeza.